We're introducing Matt, the interdimensional traveler, and well, let's open with some of your artwork and who you are. And there we are. Some of this. We've got your presentation to line right now. So
Great.
Matt, tell us all about your interdimensionality, etc., etc.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Miles. It's a real honor to be part of Bases. I started out in this kind of realm very much as a skeptic. Growing up, very scientifically minded, very normal household, and then personally got into researching physics, quantum physics, and kind of the deeper you get into science and physics, you start to get into that spooky area that Einstein talks about, of these kind of unexplainable phenomena. And from there, I really felt, I want to kind of do some internal searching to find these answers. As time goes on, we start to realize, society has its own agenda. It doesn't necessarily want to just tell you the truth. So I took a kind of more shamanistic approach in trying to find these answers to physics and deeper insights about, what's going on in reality around us. So, I sort of ended up with more than I bargained for in this pursuit.
I
And
have to say that's a little bit like Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan is a historian, and he decided he just took look at a history of the UFOs, and he's written, I think, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 books, publishes the whole stuff on this now. So it sort of pulls you in.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like a path opens up, and once you start to seek, then the answers start coming, whether you're ready or not.
Whether you're ready or not.
That's it. So this first image here that we've got up on the screen actually shows quite a few of the elements that you see when you are going into another dimension. I personally would use different meditation techniques. I would do sun gazing. I also began working with shamanic plant tools to be able to kind of get into these altered states.
Are you talking things like ayahuasca? No?
That's right. Yes, absolutely. Ayahuasca, the DMT is another one. And I found that with sort of each sacrament, you can kind of commune with the other realms in different ways. So through this kind of, I took this very seriously as a spiritual practice, and the other side could kind of recognize this. And then, so I started to receive some just really wonderful insight, ask and you shall receive. So in this first image here, things like how at the top, we see what looks like the ceiling or what looks like a wall, but yet it also appears to have a face in it. This is very much part of what happens when visiting into these other realms. Many times I wondered, am I looking at a space? Is this an individual? And the answer was yes, it's both of these things. Also, what is really remarkable in this picture is how in the distance we see like the outline of cityscapes. I've seen all kinds of these different cityscapes, spires, archways, pillars. There are these whole other cities and realities in these other dimensions that are just waiting for us to kind of rejoin and to stumble into. So this I thought was a nice image to start off with, because here we can see kind of many of the motifs.
Now, the thing which strikes me is on this the immense depth of color, the amazing bright color. I mean, I've got behind me a sunny day in Wiltshire with a white horse, and that's that's the color that we could see in reality here. But this color that you've got on screen is amazing in its detail and resolution.
Oh, absolutely. I was shocked when you know, in some of my early experiences, to close my eyes and see vivid purples and reds that I had just never, witnessed before, literally taking my breath away. So looking at, these sort of round geometric rainbow lattices that we see at the top of this image here is very much similar to the types of things that we see when we start to enter into these other dimensions.
And how do
So
you
I'll move.
travel? I mean, how do you get there? Sorry, I'll let you talk.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, any questions that come up, I'm very happy to answer. Um, it's really, it's been through research of the approaches of different sages, different shamans, and their approaches, and just taking that same kind of discipline and really, putting your heart and putting your all into, let me break through, let me get there. Uh, it also happens when you're truly seeking that paths kind of start to line up with different people who enter your life, and then suddenly, here we are sharing in ceremony together. And so it really is, to this extent, where it's this vivid and this just in your face, and you are in these realms speaking with beings. This was more so on ayahuasca, psilocybin,
Now,
the shamanic
I mean,
plant.
I notice with this is the other thing I've been trying to say. Do you get a visualization, or does the sound, is it richer as sound? But also something I've heard with ayahuasca is that people see serpents and snakes and stuff, but I don't really see that here. Although there are things which maybe could be. I mean, they're not actually snakes, but I mean, it's amazing. They're very Indian and Eastern.
Yes, yes, that's another element as I began to understand where some of these Eastern motifs must have come from. Immediately when I saw some of these places, the shapes of the archways, the layout of these kind of mosaic lattices, suddenly I immediately understood, oh, that's where we must have gotten the idea for a mosque or a cathedral. Is very much from these other realms of existence.
Well, certainly the Indian temples, the Eastern temples, the amazing temples, and places in places like Vietnam and South America, stuff. It's amazing.
Exactly. And when you happen upon these places for yourself, I feel all human spirits at some point or another will sort of find themselves in these other dimensions. Personally, I feel like that's where we come from at our root core of self. But yeah, it's a bit of a surprise. It's like, oh yes, but then again, it's also very familiar. It's like, wait a minute, it's kind of like returning to a long lost home in many ways. And this image kind of captured that. The person sort of looking up from their bed. Oh yes, here we are. That's right. I remember this now.
Now, is
Uh,
this based on your personal experience, or this is an image that you found somewhere else? I mean, this is amazing artwork.
Yes, this is by an artist named Salvia Droid. So I sort of did an internet search for the slideshow and made a few images personally, but I definitely honed in on ones that said, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about." This person has definitely been to the same areas I've been. So here, I'll go ahead and move on to the next one here.
Yeah.
And here is an image I've made. This was the first interdimensional being that I ever met. So this was many years ago now. And upon closing my eyes, this fellow was just traveling through the darkness, and it wasn't pure darkness. The the darkness also had a sort of webby consistency to it, as we see behind him here. And so here he is. He's
Yes,
floating by.
I think that's worth pointing out. If your contrast settings on your display device aren't quite set up, you will miss this. This is not jet black. It is a webbish type tunnel type thing. Like, could I suggest that maybe they're the tunnels of Set, temples of, you know,
Yes, yes. No, that is the other thing is
dark side of the Kabbalah, the Kabbalah. Oh, now that's interesting. We've lost it just mentioning that. We'll see if we can. We're actually frozen there. Hello?
hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you on the mention of that word.
Oh,
So
uh-oh.
we'll see if we can get that back up. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so definitely the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Kabbalah. I see these as these different cultural interpretations of essentially the same things, the same places, the same experiences, sort of the same fractal. Is a great word. We'll be touching on this concept of the fractal
Yeah, I think
many times.
the previous image, I would say, was fractal-ish.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's absolutely the way the spaces are built has a very fractal unfolding to it. Very much the same way that a flower unfolds, or even the way that broccoli grows. You know, you
Broccoli.
sort of can't get away from it. Sure,
Now,
sure. No,
I have to say, do you have an Eastern derivative within your family, or I mean, is this something which is in your psyche or your biology, your DNA, from a period of time elsewhere or currently?
you know, in when we get to them in some of these later experiences, I actually had my genetic code scanned on several occasions, and different lifetimes had come up. And one of them was a lifetime in Tibet, in the monasteries, which was several thousand years ago, you know, and you know, who's to say what is what, but I could feel in the core of my being that, oh yes, it starts coming back to you like a memory all of a sudden. So yes,
So
I
it's
actually
like a
do think.
genetic, it's within your genetic memory. It's like it's something intricate to the so-called junk DNA that scientists talk about. It's not
Yes,
junk, it's part of your past, which is in essence your present.
Right, and that is passed down through the family lines. So you get a bit of it from your mother's side, your father's side, and then including your own spirit. I believe has a impact on the genetic code itself. Sort of brings a bit of your own personal past into the mix as well. So back to this guy. I had a funny exchange. This was my first exchange in telepathy in these non-physical spaces, you know, and I was a younger guy in my 20s when this was happening, so I was very much like, wow, I can't believe it. Here I am. I'm looking at this 40-foot tall, cloaked being in another dimension, and so he's floating past, and then he just very slowly turns to face me. And you know, I'm saying a he, but who knows, he or they or she. And very much as they appear in this image, they appeared like flat color. There was no shadows. They sort of glow like a flat clay. There was no shininess. The being appeared to emit its own light, and there was no real face on this individual. There was just these two yellow, piercing almond eyes and this white, silvery shield face, kind of the shape of a shield. in the picture here, it may look like a bird's beak,
Or a
but this
grey,
was a
or is it the Golden Dawn? Aleister Crowley, Dal, or that entity?
right, right.
I think is that. I
We
think that's. Don't think that's correct, but he like a being, Dal or
yes, yes, definitely had the almond eyes. The head was a bit smaller. You know, I feel like there's such a plethora of these beings out there that, you know, there's, you know, how we have many different species here. There are many that are very similar to one another. So here I was, this 20-year-old kid who's just so excited to be meeting this non-human entity. I say, wow, look at you. This is so great. You know, I'm just so excited. And I asked them, you know, who are you? Right? Yeah, who are you? And their response to me was sort of like a grumble of like, you're asking me who I am? How am I supposed to answer who am I, you know, who am I, and, you know, to this stranger? So they were a little irritated by the question of me asking, who are you? You know, it was like maybe infringing a little bit or something. And they just looked back at me and they responded telepathically as a voice that just came through my consciousness. And this just worked automatically. I didn't have to try to do anything special. They just responded, well, who are you? You know, tell me who you are first. Give me an idea, and then I'll maybe reply. And I just, at the time, you know, I was just very much this loving, explorative human being. So I think at the time I said something like, I am a conduit of love. You know, I was being very, you know, flowery at the time.
Wow.
And the being, you know, heard me say, I'm a conduit of love. And he just sort of says, okay, well,
Hey,
carry
don't
on,
bother me.
carry
Hey,
on.
you know, don't bother me already. You know.
Yeah, he was sort of like, you know, and then he turned around and went on with his business.
Jeez, one of those new humans in the domain.
What are you doing here? You know,
Yeah.
sort of a bit of a rabble rouser at the time.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience with, you know, a non-human entity. It was just kind of very simple like that. And then moving forward, you asked about snakes. Oh boy,
Wow.
yep, sure enough, they're out there. They look sort of technological. They look sort of like Hindu repeating patterns, these kind of like astral geometries. They appear almost like they are an environment. Like I look at bodies now and think, you know, they are like a form of like interdimensional building in a way, or a manner of spirit is one way that it's put. So the first,
are these moving? Are they living, moving beings?
Oh yes. When you are there, they are moving and living in such high definition of such vivid color that you're not used to it. It takes getting used to. The first time I came across a large serpent like this, it was this vivid neon green of such complex geometries I could not even stand to look in their direction. So the first time I came across one of these giant serpents, it didn't feel negative. It didn't feel aggressive. It felt like, all right, here we go. Here you are. And the first time this happened, it was too intense for me. I couldn't take it. So I had to actually open my eyes and hit the ejection seat because it was just, whew, you know, let's calm down here. Then later, as I became more practiced, just sort of more calm in my energy, I sort of started learning these little tricks through experience of how to protect my own energy, how to sort of set the tone for the space. The next time I came across a giant serpent, it was very much like a gatekeeper. If speaking of the Egyptian Book of the Dead earlier, there's this idea that as we, you know, travel through these different domains in the afterlife, there are gatekeepers at sort of each sector of the afterlife, if you will. So going into these other states, I have another slide later on where I met with another gatekeeper. There are these gatekeeper type entities. And
What exactly do you mean by a gatekeeper? Are you talking about some kind of interdimensional portal gatekeeper or something like that? Or in what
yes,
way is the gate, and how do you visualize that gate to call it a gate?
Right. Essentially, when you are going from one reality into another frequency of existence, into another reality, there seem to be guards at these junctures to sort of make sure, like, oh, is somebody trying to jump over the fence here that isn't supposed to be, for instance.
What are these guards represented? Do you have anything on how what they would be described as? I've heard others describe them as some of the characters you'd see in ancient Egypt.
Yes, yes, and they definitely have that motif of hieroglyphics, but yet it's also its own thing. I've always thought of them as gatekeepers, or when you're going through the different stages of the bardo in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you sort of meet with these different forces to have exchanges with. So they sort of seem like the troll under the bridge, if you will, is maybe another kind of allegorical story. But in this case, it was a giant cobra. Again, the size of these things is they are immense. I had to. You have a bit of your own physical body when you go over there. You still feel like yourself. So I had to lean back to look up at this giant snake. And so this giant astral snake, felt as though I was encroaching on their territory. I was an intruder. And so the snake poised to strike me and hit me with this telepathic scream, really, of my only desire is to destroy and consume you. It was very like, whoa, do not pass,
I think I get the impression that was maybe your cue to leave.
Yeah, I was like, whoops, maybe, I'm wandering somewhere I shouldn't be, right? So I just, sort of took a step back and said, oh, please, my apologies if I've made you uncomfortable. I am a wanderer who is exploring these domains for the first time. I'm not used to these kind of exchanges. I very much respect you and respect your space. I mean you no harm. I will only be here for a short time, and I will, go on my way. I tried to be just very courteous in my reaction and my response. And this giant astral snake was immediately receptive to that kind of vibration of my response. They picked up immediately, like, oh, okay, you're not the type of spirit I'm worried about. And in this case, he said, all right. You're only here a little while. Go ahead and take a look around. And he just settled right back in to a resting coil, and sort of went back asleep. The alarm was turned off, so to speak, once I sort of responded to him in that respectful manner. He realized, oh, you're not a threat. You're not a trespasser. Go ahead, take a look around, then you'll be on your way. So that was a very telling experience for me in the way that we emotionally conduct ourselves. It very much has a real-time reaction as to how these interplays in these other domains occur.
So if you weren't able to keep presence of mind, it may have maybe bitten you or something. I'm being very polite here.
Certainly, I think if you sort of respond in an aggressive way, if you have a big spiritual head about you and you think you can step on the snake, sort of depending on your reaction, certainly if it wanted to, who knows, it could just reach out and, eat you right up. And that's something else I realized. I had sort of jumped into these experiences head first, as sort of self-initiating myself as this Western, young kid, really, still when I was starting out. So I luckily picked up on good etiquette fairly early on through trial and error. But really, many people, if they were to suddenly find themselves in these other dimensions, it can be very dangerous.
I mean,
So
what do you
I think
think, based on your subsequent work, what happens if you do outstay your welcome, if that's one way of putting it?
I do believe you can be caught up in these interdimensional domains. You can find yourself, sort of stuck in a place for a while and not exactly sure how to work your way out of it. So you really do need to sort of spiritually practice and develop good co-respect, good protection. You lay the ground rules of how you energetically conduct yourself. And essentially, those are the tools to sort of keep a fair ground, a fair exchange, energetic exchange, so that, you just don't get nipped up by something who's looking for an easy lunch. Just like in the jungle, essentially, it feels very much like an energetic jungle out there.
Well, that seems to be nature. That seems to be the way things, you know. But this is conjecture. So continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So luckily, this worked out, and luckily I learned good spiritual practices to kind of conduct myself over there, and I'm here in one piece.
Could you go through those spiritual practices? I mean, what do you mean by spiritual practices, and where did you
Yes,
learn the right ones, and where did you not wish to use the inappropriate ones?
That is the big question on this planet, especially. I have a great slide of kind of on that very point coming up here in a little bit, but I'll say very briefly. For me, it boils down to just spiritual basics. The simpler, the better. Things like the golden rule as like a way of energetically conducting yourself. Also in alignment with the golden rule is the golden ratio. So this sort of
And
way.
it seems the Golden Dawn, to use a society's name, yeah.
Sure. Different organizations that have sort of gone through the same spiritual process of refinement. Absolutely. I'm not so into the labels or this sect or that sect. That becomes very kind of muddled in human society. And for me,
it's precisely that kind of stuff that I would like to explore, so that people do get a better idea of what's going on, as opposed to go to the incorrect pathways.
Absolutely. So we will touch on that theme again as we continue here. But that's right. We're already kind of getting into the fractal of this whole conversation, so to speak. All right. Yep. So here is another space. I made this image kind of blinding on purpose because that's how this particular experience was. As you can kind of see in this space, it's made up of these beautiful, subtle geometries. When you are in these spaces, there is no fixed ground and no fixed ceiling. It is based on your own orientation. So you could rotate to the left and now suddenly this surface is the floor. Or you could flip upside down, and suddenly that surface is now the ceiling. So I was in this space that felt just so relaxing, so blissful, so energetic, that it felt as though nothing could get any better. I felt my body, my earthly body, was sort of left behind, and I had never experienced such relaxation. As soon as you get out of the body, it's like, oh, thank goodness. I didn't realize I had such an ache in my back, right? Until you don't have to deal with it any longer. So it was just very like, oh, wow, this is great. And the space sort of replied to me of like, oh, wow, we're so happy you enjoy it so much. They were very pleased that I was pleased. And I was just communicating with the space itself. And I said, wow, it's so interesting to be blinded, but my eyes are closed. And the space asked me, they said, oh, what is eyes closed? What is this? We're curious. What do you mean by eyes closed? And I had to step back and think for a moment. And I realized all of my associations and thinking regarding with my body had been left back with my body. And when I was trying to remember, oh, what is eyes closed? I couldn't even remember what eyes even were. I was so gone from that aspect of myself. I had to respond and say, you know what? I actually cannot even remember what eyes closed even is. And that was a bit of a funny experience to kind of recognize, wow, once you are out of the body sort of stays there, and here you are, as your spirit, if you will.
Well, it's interesting the way that these are still images. Are these in motion? Are this all moving? All these beautiful
yes,
scenes?
when you are there, it is alive and everything is moving. It moves at a very particular rate. Other people who have had these experiences will know what I'm talking about. It moves in a way where it appears as if it's constantly moving, yet it almost seems still. It's this very kind of relaxed, kind of like Tai Chi type of a movement that's just very smooth and, like a calm stream. Very fluid.
It's reminding me of certain Indian restaurants where they have sort of like a rippling going through some of the beautiful artwork they would have. Is it that kind of a thing?
You're right on, actually. When having conversations with other people in the past, I have used that exact example, because that is exactly what it's like. Yes, you nailed it. Yep. So while I was in this space, just feeling great, like, wow, I'm feeling amazing. I thought, man, this is so great. This is so beautiful. How could anything go wrong? How could even wrong exist if this feels like this, As soon as I had that thought, guess who showed up? Was some wrong feelings. So all of a sudden, here I am. I'm in this beautiful place. I have the thought, man, can anything even go wrong? And sort of like a creeping vine that sort of wrapped its way around my waist, it sort of said, oh, you rang? You just had the thought of, can anything go wrong? Hey, here I am. You just opened up that wavelength frequency and invited me here. And it appeared as this dark alien neon jungle substance that sort of crept its way around me, and I could feel the physical sensation of being touched. and very just creepily wrapping around saying, oh yeah, it can get bad. You just asked. So here I am. So I had to kind of, physically push away. It almost felt like a over exuberant dog who just really wants to jump into your lap, and lick your face. I had to push this away and say, oh no, never mind. Actually,
Yeah.
I was just fine over here.
Actually, I mean, is it possible to mention some of the artists that this work is from?
Yes, actually, I have that list, and I will give that to you. We could put that in the description. I don't have it here on the screen right now, but we'll put those links for people to look at them. These are some of the best of the best.
This is
Absolutely.
fantastic. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing artwork happening here.
Oh yes, I was so pleased when looking for visual examples that, oh wow, this is really right on. It's also nice affirmation for myself to see, oh man, other people have been there too. Absolutely. So in this experience of from here of like, wow, it was nirvana, enlightenment, just pure light and just amazing. As soon as I had that thought of, oh, could it even be bad? The thought itself opened up that passageway for something not so great, to sort of show up. So that was another.
So how did you feel? How did you get your wisdom? How did you have mental or thought discipline? Is this how you were trained? How you were taught on how to do that?
It was very much based on direct experience. So in this case, it became immediately apparent to me as this was happening. Oh, because I just had that thought, I just brought in this frequency, and it made me just realize, oh, this is part of navigating these realms. What we think is part of how we navigate these spaces. The emotions that are coming through us is part of the joystick, if you will, of moving around in these spaces. So it made me realize, man, we've got such a nice buffer back home on Earth in the physical body. It's a bit spongy. It gives you this buffer between your thoughts and reality. These spaces, there is no buffer between your thoughts and reality. It is instant. It is this thought, this thing, real time. That was another thing to get used to. With our world and our technology, we have to wait for a web page to load. We have to wait for the paint to dry. We're used to this time between things happening. In these spaces, things are happening instantaneously. And it's so real time that you have to kind of catch yourself. And it's like, okay, I see. It helped me realize, okay, I see where the bar is to help me know how to better navigate these kind of experiences. Yeah. And also the realization of, it's very much similar back here on Earth. Our thoughts, our emotions also navigate how we go through life. There's just much more of a physical buffer in that process. But over here, that buffer is not there. It is real time.
So you're able to learn from these experiences. Is something that you're able to build up on. I mean, how many times did you go through this to be able to learn as such?
Yes, it was really notable experiences, a few dozen, and what was very magical is really the word that comes to mind. What was magical about this process is that it happened in stages. So I would learn something at this stage. The next time I would go, that learning was very important. which helped me to learn something else, which then the next time came into account to help me to learn something else. It was as though the development in my consciousness was also determining what this next experience was going to be. And this is another thing we see mirrored in life. As we learn certain things, one thing leads to another, and we realize, oh, I needed these experiences to be ready for these later experiences. So it's been a very magical, synchronistic type of a experience.
It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Miles. No,
I mean, this is really very illuminating.
Oh, I'm so happy. I felt like, oh man, I got to try to get in contact with Miles and do a basis, because I know this will be a lot of fun. So thank you again for having me. This is a pleasure. So I'll go ahead and move on forward here. So this is another gatekeeper experience. This one, it was much more, I was in like a dark blue dungeon, and this skeleton came rushing towards me, and he was screaming, "Trespasser!" You know, he's very upset with me. "Trespasser!" And the whole space was putting on this very cold, very rigid sort of, the space had a very aggressive demeanor of like, "You're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? Send out the skeleton knight to get him out of here." You know, that was sort of what was going on here. And you know, again, I'm like a younger guy. I kind of like Metallica and stuff like that. So I'm just thinking like, whoa, dude, look at this. This is like heavy metal, man.
Is this actually from an album of some kind, or part of the artwork for an album?
This piece here I found, it's I think actually from a role-playing game. So I kind of fused a few images together here just to create this visual example. But this was very much how it felt in the space, was like, "Trespasser, get out of here." And I was like, wow, look at this like heavy metal, like armored skeleton that's like alive, and you know,
I think it's Roman and sort of Greek and Roman.
Yes, actually, that's why I went with this one, because it did have a kind of Greek Roman vibe to the look of the armor. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is so cool. Look at how cool this is. This is happening right now. And the skeleton couldn't help but laugh. And all of a sudden, because I had this demeanor of like, wow, this is so cool. Look at this other dimension, this like heavy metal skeleton.
Yeah, comedy Rasta almost. Rastafarian, no?
Yes, he immediately with the laughter, he immediately transformed from this very shill, very spiky, aggressive soldier skeleton. He immediately transformed before my eyes into a colorful rainbow Day of the Dead style skeleton who's just joyful and laughing. And the dungeon space just lit up into this golden light. And then all of a sudden there's all these little critters who are kind of hiding in the shadow, and they just jumped in and they start dancing. These silly little fuzzy things were like dancing in circles. There was a whole line of, you know, at the car dealerships, when they've got those, they send the air up through those tubes, and they look like these wild sort of swaying tubes in the air. They're, you know, like 20 feet tall. There was all these swaying tube creatures that sort of joined the party. And just like that, based on my demeanor of just being like, whoa, this is awesome. Wow, how cool. This is really cool to be here with you. That energy was like a spark that just changed the whole atmosphere, again, just so quickly. And then, you know, suddenly the party just started. Now we're just having a good time. So yeah, this was another one of these examples of, you know, what you bring energetically determines so much.
This is
Yeah.
amazing.
So, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
I
Well, we've got quite a few to go through. It's interesting if we could move on a little bit.
yeah.
But
Let's keep going.
in
Let's
your
keep
own
going.
time. Yeah. Oh, this is
Right on. Right on.
flames.
So this one, I went over and just started getting a bad feeling. Started feeling like, oh, I need to be more responsible in life. I need to like not be trying to go into these other dimensions and trying to find out about all this stuff. I need to be more present in my physical life. I started getting very upset with myself and very anxious. My energy.
I mean, do you think that you were being trained? Something was teaching you something. There's some other element involved here other than your consciousness.
I do. Later, I'm going to get to. I actually met what I felt to be my higher self. So I believe a part of me that is perhaps outside of linear space time was sort of helping to arrange these this sort of process. Yes, I do think there was a little bit of that going on. It was also that I was seeking. I was very clear and like, I want to know about the mysteries of the universe. I want some spiritual truth. I'm seeking in all these other religions and all these holy books. I got multiple translations of the Bible and did deep study for many years in that regard, to still sort of be left with my hands up in the air. And then it was like, okay, one thing led to another, and then this path opened up, and then it was like, okay, this is what I've been looking for. So not for everybody, but for people who, have sort of exhausted everything else, one thing will lead to another. So in this case, very quickly here, my energy was unstable. I was very anxious, very self-condemning. And that energy signature was so unstable that it was trying to grab onto some solid ground, but the energy had nothing to hold on to. And that created this friction, which appeared like glowing flames. And I saw it and I immediately recognized, oh my goodness, if someone were to die in an anxious state and they had an energetically unstable field, they would look around themselves and see these, what look like flames. They'd think, oh, I've died and gone to hell.
Suggesting this is hell? Is this something it's hell space you're in, or some other domain like that? I mean, did it feel hot? Was it hurtful?
It didn't feel hot. Didn't feel hurtful. I think that hell has been based off of this type of a space, but then sort of dramatized for human agendas and human endeavors. That's a very important distinction. When I was there, it just felt like, oh, you're just slipping right now and things are unstable, and this is the way that slipping unstable energy materializes. It looks like flames. They looked kind of jelly-like. They didn't look exactly like our flames do here in the physical. So what I did here is I was like, well, great. Here I am. I was already very upset with myself. So this actually wasn't bothering me too much. I did have that realization though of like, oh, no wonder, the stories of hell and, feeling badly and that kind of a thing. It made sense to me, like where it came from. So I just sort of floated over to a spot that had less friction going on. And you can just intuitively float around, you look over there and all of a sudden you're moving over there. There's nothing to it when you're there. So I sort of go over to this place that has less friction going on, and I think, all right, let me just take a deep breath and calm down. And before I even finished the thought, everything leveled out into these perfectly smooth blue rings. So again, just as earlier, with the thoughts of, let me calm down, the space around me immediately changed. It changed so quickly that it was a shock. It was, again, it's in real time. There is no separation. There's no lag. I found myself a bit of a calm area. I said, all right, let's just take it easy. Let's calm down here. Boom. Energy was stable again. Everything was back to normal again. And I thought, oh, maybe that's, again, this is how we navigate these other dimensions. You know, if you had a certain disposition, you know, you could very well stay in that unstable friction space for a long time. But if you're the type of person who will sort of step off to the side, take care of yourself, take a deep breath, calm yourself down, that kind of energetic practice, it has this type of a result in our energy field around us. So again, that was this kind of big lesson here of like, oh, I can kind of switch back and forth between these in myself. And is my field unstable or am I, am I stable? So exactly. All right. So this next one, this one was a doozy. I learned a lot of this one. So suddenly, I was at the gates of heaven.
Is this the ceiling? Is this the ceiling in the Vatican? Is it? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, this is. I believe this is the Vatican or the Sistine Chapels. I'll get you that list afterwards here. But very much had this type of a vibe of the flowing cloth, the billowing clouds. You couldn't exactly tell, what was up or down in this space. And the clouds had these shimmering rainbows in them that were just so gorgeous. It was like, wow. Glittering golden gates, the whole 9 yards. It was, okay, this is, I guess, trying to look like heaven right now. And so here's where the lesson came in. I was approached by 4 monks, and these are like, earth monks that, with the bald head and the brown robes, everything. So we could sort of imagine them in the center of this picture here. And they were floating towards me, these 4 monks. And they said, oh, it is you. You are the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And I responded immediately saying, oh, no, you don't. You're not going to try and pull that one on me. I've got friends who think that kind of thing. I know enough about Christ consciousness to know everyone is a Christ in the making. Don't try to put that kind of ego trip on me. Don't try to tell me who I am using this like earthly vernacular. I told them, I need you to reveal your true self to me. I don't feel that this is a co-respecting exchange right now. You're trying to impose your will on me by telling me who I am. And immediately, 3 of the 4 monks vanished, and I was left in this murky brown cave. The appearance of heaven was a psychic vision that was being presented to me. These were not 4 monks. This was something else going on. This was a bit of a psychic ploy going on. So one of them remained, and he no longer appeared as this Zeus-like flowing monk. He appeared like a Middle Eastern guy, just like a normal guy. His robes were, kind of dingy now. It was not so spectacular anymore. And he comes up to me and he sort of wants to level with me. He says, okay, I get what you're saying, and you kind of know what's going on a little bit. I'll tell you what, take me on as your spiritual advisor, and I'll make sure you get lots of money back home on Earth. I looked at him, I said, now what would you have to do with the evil, corrupt system of money on my home planet? Here we are in the spirit realm, you're pulling strings to money, which is a very corrupt, very bloodthirsty, very predatory control system. I want to have nothing to do with you. This guy's jaw dropped, and he hightailed it out of there with the other three, and I returned back. So that was an incredibly powerful experience where it was sort of like a jinn type experience where they're trying to make a deal with you, and, fortunately, I've heard enough of those fairy tales and seen enough of those episodes of Twilight Zone to know you don't want to make a deal in the spirit realm. If something's trying to make a deal with you, that is this very sort of trickster type of energy. The fact that they were pulling from this kind of like Roman Catholic veneer, which, is very corrupt and very life denying and condemning in many ways, was also a red flag for me. Here they are trying to basically push all of my senses aside, overwhelm me with this heavenly grandeur, and try to tell me who I am, right? This was very much a wolves in sheep's clothing type of an experience here. Yeah, so that was very impactful, big time, very eye-opening.
Is this a cloud formation, or is it deep underground?
Yes, it felt deep underground. It felt kind of abstract. It essentially went from this holy, beautiful, sparkling clear heaven to a murky, brown, just space. So these beings had psychically controlled my perspective and what I was seeing. So that is, again, that's something you gotta, kind of watch out for. What I've learned to sort of disseminate and discern in these experiences is to check motive. Is there any room for ulterior motive? Are they trying to impose like such spectacular grandeur on me that I'm not able to think straight or to ask questions? These become the type of tools that we use when we're navigating this energetic jungle out there. What is the motive? Reveal your true form. I need acknowledged co-respect. I need to be able to ask questions and get clarifications. If they're trying to say, oh, we don't have time for that, here, come over here, look at this amazing thing over here, you can start to feel that they're trying to encroach on your free will. So that is really, again, one of these kind of solid foundations I found that I could work from through a variety of these types of experiences. Yeah. So moving on.
Yes. Now we got. I hear, see nothing, and speak no evil.
Yes, this
the three monkeys, except the three greys.
Yes, right. I thought that was pretty clever. This one was pretty good. I actually went with this image.
Yeah, I think we've actually done an hour now, just to let you know. And I think we've got quite a few to go. If you want to sort of maybe give a little bit more speed on things, perhaps, but depending on how you want to portray things on this.
Certainly. I'll go a little bit more quickly through these ones. Certainly. Thanks for that heads up. Yeah. So this image, I went with this image because this is what this gray alien looked like. It looked real, yet it also looked a bit like a flat cartoon. Again, everything is emanating its own light. This was a very nasty being. The first thing it says to me.
How did that portray itself? How did you feel that?
Oh, it felt.
How do you get these? How do you get these feelings of emotion? How does that communicate to you? Because I mean,
You are.
especially, I mean, you had this huge snake and things, which some people would be scared completely of, but
Yeah.
it was just protecting its own realm, so to speak. But how do you
Right.
get how do you get this emotion of nastiness that you talked about?
It is. Your emotions are extremely sensitive. When you get a bad feeling up your spine, like, uh-oh, I got a bad feeling about this. That feeling was more overwhelming than I'd ever felt in my life when this entity entered my energetic field. We have good tingles, like, oh, that our hair stands on end from something just so beautiful and wonderful.
And I
Or we'll
notice
get that.
again, you've got a background to this. It's as if you're in the temples, the tunnels of Set.
Yes, these subtle backgrounds of these types of neon meshes that have their own kind of activity going on is very much part of the space and part of the experience. Yes, so in this case, I got a very bad feeling. This was quickly confirmed when the first thing this being telepathically communicated to me was, it had this kind of attitude too, like, why do you want to be good on planet Earth? Like, kind of scoffing at me, like, planet Earth isn't for being good. Ugh, like, how could you? So I replied, I said, oh, is this are you trying to say this is like a hell world? Is this some kind of a place you're supposed to go and be bad? And he says, no, it's not hell. Hell was sort of silly to this being. And then he jokes with me. He says, hell is my job of keeping things the way that they are in the world. That's hell, I'll tell you that. And I was sort of like, well, that sucks to be you. Sorry about that. I gotta get out of here. And it got kind of upset with me for being sort of like dismissive and not vibing with it. So unfortunately, this being proceeded to psychically torture me for what felt like quite a long time. By the end of it, I reached a space. Interestingly enough, this being shape shifted into a Roman soldier, which it's interesting to see these kind of motifs come up. Long story short, I was, by the end of it, like, you're just so desperate. You're an energetic parasite. No matter what you do to me, it's not going to change who I am. I hope you find your own peace somehow, because this just honestly seems like a miserable existence for yourself. That this is just how you have to operate on a day-to-day basis. You weren't kidding. It really is hell to live that way. This made that being very upset, and they sort of threw me away, like, I'm so done with you, just, that was the end of that one. And at the end of it, there was a golden being who met me and said, now you can be free. When you're able to face those type of entities in that way, the way that you did, that is a key to freedom. Sent me on my merry way. So that was also another very telling experience. This one, I had the honor and privilege to be in the presence of the spirit of the earth. She was so dignified and poised, to be in her presence was just so humbling, and like how you feel towards your mom. I could only see the silhouette of her. She kind of knew I was sort of sneaking through a back gate. So she didn't want to fully reveal herself to me, but she still was like, well, I'll share a few words with you since you're in the neighborhood, kind of an attitude. And I told her all of the things I see that could be good for our world and the ways I want to try to, get this kind of knowledge out there into the world and things like that. And she gave me her approval. She said, yes, that sounds all well and good. Just remember the importance of reducing suffering in the world. These higher ideals of exploring, the other realities and all this kind of stuff is very nice, but remember to stay grounded down to earth as your physical being where you are, and to help me reduce suffering in the world. That was her motherly advice to me, to kind of remember. That's kind of the big important thing.
And I think the next one's like a Buddha. Is it some kind of?
Yes. So this was the Earth, and then later I had the honor to meet with the Sun, and the Sun appeared as a young, like very young, like early teenage years individual who was a mix of Native American and Indian in their facial features, and clothed in this beautiful robe of sunlight on a throne of sunlight, radiating sunlight. And very much in this image where we have these beings, there were griffins, there were lions, there were eagles, there were
demons. Are they demonic on the outside?
No,
they don't look. They don't. Some of them don't
one.
look too nice, with spears and all sorts of
things.
Yeah,
this not exactly like this image. This was sort of as close as I could find. But this, when I was there and it was happening, this felt like sort of the Sun's home, his throne that he lived on.
I mean, this is obviously a representation of an actual art form, or this. I mean, do you know the title of this work?
This is actually a sculpture that I found that you can actually buy for your yard. This is like some home decor.
I mean, we're obviously using artwork here, which has been designed for other things, but you're conveying a meaning to this. So moving on to the other one that's next. Could you?
Yeah, I'll quickly say when I met with the Sun, he helped to remove a interdimensional piece of black glass that had been embedded into my forehead from a previous experience. He was very upset that had gotten there. He said, that's not part of the deal. That's not supposed to happen to my Earth children. He let me know, it's hard to get a word in edgewise because your thoughts are so busy all the time. Remember to clear your mind so I can get through to you more easily and don't have these blockades between us. And when he left, he told me, never forget how much I love every particle of your being and how much I love every single human and everything that I shine down upon the earth. I just have so much love for you. Don't ever forget it. And I felt that through my body, like, wow, it was a very touching, incredible exchange. So it was such an honor to get to meet the Earth and the Sun in these ways. This next one is I met with a being that looked exactly like me. We had the same face, which is a funny experience. You can imagine just meeting someone who has your exact face, right? And this was a very golden red and yellow space, and they sort of parted these curtains. It seemed as though they were sort of stepping away from a gathering to kind of meet me on the patio for a moment. before they then just stepped back into what they were doing. It was a very impromptu, quick type of exchange. So he made a joke like, "Funny seeing you here." You know, he kind of knew like I was up to a little bit of mischief. And he told me, "Thank you for doing everything you're doing in the material realm of existence. Because if you weren't down there doing that work, I couldn't be here doing what I'm doing." And he was very grateful to me for this. So, and this made me understand, oh, we probably have these different vibrational expressions of ourselves in these different realities, and we all have our own set of our day-to-day lives, and one does this here and one does that there, so that not a single being is trying to do it all. So while I had the chance, I was like, hey, you know, these other dimensions are so nice and well kept and put together. You know, why don't you guys just step on through to Earth and just help fix things? And his response is like, you know, we come through you, yeah, our earthly persona, as much as we can get through to the material world. We can't stop what we're doing and just come in there, because if you do that kind of thing, then you're not evolving. You're getting used to others coming in and doing things, doing your evolution for you. That won't stick. So they told me, I respect you and your abilities so much that I would never interfere with your life and with your evolution in that manner. That is just beyond disrespectful. To step in and try to fix, you know, do evolution for someone is ridiculous. So I was like, okay, you know, and my last question to my higher self was, you know, but what about all this bad stuff, you know, the suffering that's just horrible, and these horrible things and this injustices in the world? What, you know, what do we have to say about that? You know, I felt like this is my chance, right? And his response was sort of like, well, you know, this is a work in progress, admittedly. It is unfortunate when that kind of stuff happens, and that, you know, goes to show you the importance of just making life the best you can make it, and protecting your energy and removing desperation and reducing suffering. That's why these things are so important. These bad things do happen. He had the tone of like, you know, there's no real good answer for that stuff, I'm sorry to say. When you have dense realities like the one you're in that have so many expressions at the same time, there's just always going to be a mess. It's just messy business. There's unfortunately no way around it. So just keep doing the best you can. And, you know, fortunately, love gets through to where you are. That's the best help of all, is to be able to have access to love. So that was like, all right, you know, again, I was feeling like I was getting that spiritual sustenance that I had always been looking for, and had the chance to actually ask these questions and receive some form of an answer. So moving on. This was a library type of a space, and I met 3 tall beings who wore a sort of Spanish tile tunics. They wore funny sombrero hats that had a very fat brim. And they're like, oh, wow, look who just popped in. This is pretty interesting. And they immediately tried to figure out where I came from and when I came from. And one of them told the other one, oh, you know, he's like the Beatles. And I was immediately surprised. I was like, the Beatles? You guys know the Beatles? And they said, oh, yeah, of course we know the Beatles. Everybody knows the Beatles, you know? So before they even mentioned, like, oh, you're from planet Earth, their association was like, oh, yeah, you know, like the Beatles, right? So they associated me with the music that they knew of Earth, rather than the planet, which I thought was just so funny that they brought up the Beatles. And then the other one said, no, he's not from that era. He's more like Hollywood celebrities, you know, that kind of a thing. And I'm like, you guys are talking about music and talking about Hollywood celebrities? This is not very spiritual in the spirit world. And they kind of looked at me funny. And they said, you know, that's the kind of stuff that's echoing off your planet for everyone to see. You know, they were surprised with me that I was surprised. You know, this was common knowledge to them. They were very interested in how I was taking our telepathic communication and then turning it into language to talk to myself. They thought you're sort of adding this extra step. It's not just us consciously telepathically communicating. You're turning these all into words that you're internally kind of communicating to yourself. Can we investigate this a little bit deeper? And I was like, sure, yeah, you can take a look at what I'm doing. And all of a sudden in the space, the alphabet showed up, A through Z, in like this clay, this soft clay. We had the uppercase A, lowercase a, uppercase B, lowercase b. Everything was a different primary color. It was sort of fantastic to just see it all sort of spring to life. And we started with A, and the whole space filled up with like these A vibrations. Like the whole space became A. Then they went to the other end. For some reason, they started on either end and worked their way in. So they went over to Z. And then everything filled up with zippy electricity and zaps and zips, and everything was very And then we went to B, and B was very the whole place just bubbled up with bubbles that kind of looked like the shape of bees. And then they caught on. They said, oh, we get it. We get what you're doing here. You're taking these different vibratory expressions, giving them a form, and then putting them together to communicate to yourself. So they were very interested in this kind of like physical language making that I was doing internally. So to wrap this one up, another one mentioned how much they respect the earthly precipitation system, and they admired the way the water washes in, goes into the clouds, and rains down onto the trees. They said that's a very sophisticated and very rare type of an ecosystem that's very admired. And last,
I have to say, you also sent something which called Unseen Dimensions. Is that your work?
Yes, that is a series of journals that I created, and we will leave links to that in the description as well.
Yeah.
So that's all of these stories with more detail and even more stories. And yeah, just kind of a collection of thoughts and, you know, just considering all this stuff. Yeah. So that's a fun thing. It's a freebie. It's a free PDF I just put out there. It's sort of a type of book I always wished I could have come across when I was spiritually seeking, and I wanted to put out into the world.
And that's available that's available from Amazon, isn't it?
Yes, I did put. There's free versions. I have a free PDF, and then I put it on Amazon for people who like to have a physical book.
And what's physically in it in terms of?
Oh, it's words. It's all written words. It's just more in-depth tellings of these stories and more stories and just reflections on the world after having all of these experiences. Yeah, so happy to share that for those who are interested.
Well, let's speeding on with the graphics.
Yep, absolutely. I'll quickly say the last thing one of them said here was, I really respect everything you guys are doing on the earth, the growth, the evolution you're doing there, but personally, I could not embody there. That is just too much for me to handle. It was a bit like a movie that was just too intense for that individual, which also I thought was quite interesting. Right. Moving on. This was a throne room experience where I met what felt like a diva, or as they call the Watchers. She had light blue skin. She was human. That's another thing I should mention, was the surprise of seeing all these humans everywhere. These were non-Earth humans. So our form definitely does not originate here. We are sort of a physical version of a model.
Well, the humans are fairly diverse. Can you describe any different types?
Their skin color was different. The shape of their heads would differ. Some of them seemed to be made of like a liquid, where their head actually flowed up into the ceiling, and it would sort of move with them as they would move around. But the two arms, the torso, the two legs was a very consistent form I came across again and again. Also, beings wearing robes. I saw lots of beings wearing robes. They would be only different in that they'd have a little shoulder piece. It appeared very spacey and like something I'd never seen before, but the rest of the outfit was very like a robe we'd see the Greeks wearing. So this individual was sitting in a throne that came out of the wall. It had this kind of bluish mosaic feeling to the space here in this image. Across from her, where she was facing, were all of these openings to different places. I saw balconies, I saw buildings, I saw forests, jungles, all of these different places through these different openings across from her. So this was like her interdimensional television in a way. Of she just was on the throne and watching these different spaces. She had a bit of a guard who looked like this owl man, and he had brought me to her saying sort of like, what do we do with this guy? He sort of popped up. We don't know what to do. What do you say? So he was sort of, trying to get an idea of what to do from upper management. And she scanned my life. This was one of the first times I had my whole DNA code just scanned, your life flashing before your eyes experience. I saw things I didn't even recognize, but felt them as though they were me. And she got kind of a bad taste in her mouth from it. She said, ugh. She had a physical response like, why would anyone want to do that? So she had this response of like, ugh, let's get him out of here. Send him back wherever you got him from, which I thought was quite a funny response. And then, sure enough, I got sent back on my way. Next, this
wow
image
this is amazing
image,
art. We've really got to credit the wonderful artists here.
Absolutely, yeah. I have that list with me.
Speeding on.
Yep. So this was when I met beings of pure light. I could tell these beings could appear to me however they wanted to. They appeared in humanoid form because they were like, well, he's a human form. They'll be more comfortable this way. This image very much captures the feeling of these spaces, how this image seems to move, yet it's not moving. The kind of clarity and the vividness of the color, this really captures how it feels. So I met two beings of light. One was blue, who I met on different occasions. Glowing blue made out of seashell patterns. Everything was seashell patterns. No facial features, just the outline of the body covered in these seashell patterns. And the space around us was the same, interlocked seashell patterns everywhere. he scanned my genetic line. He let me see the process because he wanted to be more transparent. He's like, here, let me show you what I'm doing. This is what it looks like when we scan the genetics, the genetic code. And I turned into a single line, made up my entire body was one single weaving line. We went through this line, and there were parts that were a bit crumpled up or broken. And these were traumatic experiences of my past. I don't have to go into the specific ones, but some were worse than others. And it's like with any of us, these different experiences, our traumas, our victories, our growth, they make us who we are. So he sort of assessed my whole picture. He helped kind of like alleviate some of the strain here and there. He sort of helped straighten out some of the lines a little bit. He was very, very friendly, very co-respecting. Like I could tell this, this being is just very, I don't have to worry about them. And they only offered love. They only offered support. They could tell you have a repeating pattern where you get very caught up on evil. Like you are always pushing against and fighting evil. And they said, let me help you with this. Try to remember that evil is not the label of evil. Evil is what happens when a being or a consciousness gets desperate. It gets frustrated. It feels unheard. It lashes out. Just like when you feel frustrated, you feel unheard. You want to lash out. You want to let people know how you feel. This is what you're calling evil. Try to remember it for what it is, not the label that you are assigning it. Because what is it really? It is a lack of love. It's a lack of care. We label it as evil. We're ready to fight. We're ready to shoot it down. We're ready to just send that same hateful vibration right at it. That just perpetuates the bad momentum. But when you see it as like, let me bring love to this, let me bring nurturing, care, let me bring that vibration, that is the direction that's going to help, so that it's not an ongoing issue for you. So that was those things that I had been internally seeking, the experiences could immediately tap into that and deliver. It was a sort of communication happening without even having to say anything. So that was the blue being of light. The magenta being of light I met. She held me in a giant hand. I'm a decently tall guy, but the hand was over 12 feet in length that I was being held in. This was, again, a very maternal essence. And she showed me a particular posture, meditation posture, where I was half leaning backwards and half leaning forwards. And she was saying, in this spot where you're both frontwards and backwards, that is where you can have an energetic balance. This is like the over unity principle. This is like the golden ratio. When you can find that sweet spot in yourself, in everything that makes you up. And she was teaching it to me through a body position, but she was teaching me all these different things through that one gesture. And all of that was just kind of downloading into my consciousness. I'm putting it to words, but as it's happening, it is a knowing that just you become saturated with. So those were the blue and the magenta beings I had the honor to meet. They told me, we don't know all the answers either. We are also seeking a higher source from which we come from. And it really does appear that this existence, this thing we call life, just goes on forever. We have not seen the ends of it yet, and we are evolving just like you are. And it was in that humble nature and that co-respect that they showed me just right from the start that I could feel secure in communing with them and I felt comfortable, and it was very much a co-respecting experience with these beings of light. So that was a very powerful experience. Here I've got a video, and I'll just play this. I always wondered about, the beginnings of the universe, and this experience was shown to me of these rings, these gray rings. And I'll just very quickly say, they told me these rings represent a paradox in time. Through paradoxes in time, you can expand empty space that never existed before. Once that space is created through the paradox in time, you can then plant the energy seed that is a universe. And these rings went faster and faster, just like this. And then from the center came this brilliant light in the shape of a seed. And that was our universe of light. And it had these kind of interference patterns in between happening there. So that was that experience. They were tapping into how, like, oh, you like quantum physics, you like that kind of stuff. Well, here, we'll tell you an exciting one. Part of the Big Bang is that there is a paradox in time, an intentionally created paradox of time to kind of loop things on itself and to become self-created. And I was like, whoa, again, I'm like, that's awesome, just very excited. All right. So yeah, that's it for the experiences. And now just getting into some sort of putting it into like thoughts and ideas to kind of to take something home with us, so to speak. Right. So that's about it for just the experiences that I had the visual representations for. And here's a chart that I've made kind of considering the dimensions, based off of my experiences and also just having been interested in the subject matter for so long. People talk about, oh, it's the fifth dimension, it's the sixth dimension, but really applying a number to these different realms of reality, it's a bit arbitrary. I don't think we can say definitively this is the 10th dimension or this is the 11th dimension. In some ways we can, such as time being a dimension we could think of as the fourth dimension. But as we start to get less and less dense out there into these other realities, it becomes a bit of a gray area. So I made this chart here just as a way to kind of consider these different dimensions. Personally, from my experience, it seems that they are different realms of density and different realms of consciousness, such as when I met those beings of light, the vibration was just so enlightened and so pure and loving. That felt like, what could have been the sixth or seventh dimension, really. So this chart here is intended to show how there's kind of a connection of themes between these different vibrations. We see similar patterns in the way that light waves operate, in the way that the color spectrum operates, the way that time and physics behaves, all are sort of leaving us these little fractal clues as to what these other dimensions are all about. So this is just a way to try to kind of bring those together, leading all the way back out to the multiverse beyond this universe altogether. Moving on. And yes, speaking of the multiverse beyond this universe altogether, the Hindu concept of Brahma really feels very close to the truth. How these different universes are these different aspects of this one grand being, different experiences, if you will. The multiverse I think of as a universe of universes, very much in the same way our universe is made up of galaxies. And again, we see that kind of fractal connection in nature itself. Here I have an image of another way of seeing the sort of interconnected nature of dimensions. An important thing I think to bring up is that these dimensions are not mutually exclusive. I believe we have so-called 12th dimensional energies that can come through and express themselves right here in the third dimension, such as, unconditional love, altruism, these types of ideals that we can embody and bring through. It's as though we're bringing those higher vibrations through. We're bringing the higher dimensions here into our own dimension, is a way of thinking of it. So these images just really speak to that, how these higher essences imbue themselves into the world we see around us. And in fact, we can infer quite a lot about the other dimensions and these other beings from understanding our own nature and understanding the cycles and the way things represent themselves right here in the physical reality. Another theme that comes up again and again is that of duality, this question of contrasting expressions, the light and the dark. This chart here, the Wu Qi to the Tai Chi, is such a simple, beautiful chart where we have Wu Qi, the unformed, which then is split into yin and yang, these two essences, which then recombine to form Tai Chi, or to form the reality that we see around us. We see that theme playing again and again in things such as the laughing and the crying mask that is over the theater stage with the actors and the light on the stage. It's a very allegorical representation of our existence itself. The contrasting expressions in light waves, in sound waves, is also found in the progression of the seasons. It's in the ridge line of the mountains. We can kind of see reality itself is sort of presenting itself to us as an open book. We're at a juncture in our evolution, I believe, where we are going from total dualistic thinking, where we very much isolate the light and the dark into their own categories. I believe that we are evolving into a kind of more combined view of things, where it's not good or bad, but it is good and bad. It's the light and the dark. These are not mutually exclusive essences, but these are the two extremes that are trying to be brought together in realities such as our own. And those types of patterns make up literally the way the environment runs, the way our body operates, the way our emotions present themselves. This is one of these fractal themes we see again and again. Another fractal theme is that of the golden ratio, or the endless parabola. It's that perfect angle that essentially there is little to no friction. This is why the planets orbit the way that they do. This is why the galaxies spiral the way that they do. It's the same reason that atoms are orbiting and constructed the way that they are. This is the most efficient momentum, relative momentum. That's why the planets orbit the way they do. There's no other way to do it. Otherwise, you are wasting energy, that you are adding additional friction. So this principle goes further than simply physics. It also seeps into emotional interplays. The physics of physicality are similar to the physics of emotional energies or intelligent emotions. So that's why I've always kind of had this connection between the golden ratio being so efficient. It's a great way to form nature, to form life. And the golden rule being a similar principle of good energetic practices, remove friction from our lives, help us have better connection with our reality. And this is what I was really speaking about earlier, when kind of stripping away spiritual concepts that are bogged down with very human political baggage, special interests. These religious institutions have their own agenda, and it's not necessarily to have you be spiritually enlightened, but direct from the source, so to speak, direct from nature, things like the golden ratio, the golden rule, learning through our direct experiences, that has been a more solid spiritual foundation for myself that I've come across through all of this. And again, this is just a very quick slide of, again, this fractal pattern and ordering that we see all around us. This is how reality organizes itself. So it's also a good way to organize our own ways we conduct ourselves. If it's good enough for reality that's been going on for billions of years, then it's a pattern I want to embody as much as I can. And it is just so fascinating. We have these natural spirals, these natural blood veins and lightning bolts. We can literally see the fractal patterns of existence all around us. And again, it's echoes of that source, that originating source, whatever that may be. We can see echoes of it. We can see fingerprints of it in the fractal of existence all around us. So getting down to the last few slides here, where we sort of end up in the modern era, through this kind of fractal view, this interdimensional view of reality, if we look back at recent history, we can see the ebb and flow of these patterns that has resulted in modern day humanity. We have these themes of war, themes of command and conquer patriarchy. We have super diseases which rear their ugly head every now and then, every few hundred years. The way that writing systems and money systems and organized religion came into being, in the roots of how that all occurred, we can see how that has all informed the present day. One of these ongoing themes, I believe, has been extraterrestrial genetic manipulation. That is something I believe that occurred in Sumer, in Babylonian times, in those secret societies. The Egyptians also had this happening. And these genetic manipulators also installed these empire models at the same time, making man in their image, so to speak. So personally, I feel humanity should have been left alone. I don't think ET genetic manipulation has been positive. No one asked our permission. It feels very forceful. It feels very like interrupting our evolution. I do not believe we were made to be slaves to mine for gold. I think that is cosmic propaganda. I think the only reason an ET race would mingle with genetics is if they're trying to fix their own genetics. To mine for gold is just, that's what you would tell the species you're invading. We're your gods, form your civilizations in a way we can easily control. We'll assign our pawns to be the king and the queen, and we will now harness all of your genetic material and your emotional energies for our own civilization. So I feel this has been an ongoing theme that is something we have to learn from and work through to regain our human sovereignty. Yeah. And one last quick point is I feel the destiny is not for us to become more like the machine, more like the empire, but through this interbreeding, I believe that we will bring nature to the machine. We will humanize the empire. So little did those ET overlords know that by genetically mingling with us, that this would be their very undoing of that type of a dominion campaign. That's my own take on that situation. So another big part of what we are dealing with in the modern day are these sacrifice and suffering patterns. You've always got to crawl to make your way to the top. You got to step over everybody else. It's ongoing pyramid schemes. The violence, the wars, this is like a feast of energy for unsavory forces. So I believe that the crucifixion of the Christ is actually a big condemnation on humanity. It's an allegory of where we are. They've taken Christ consciousness, nailed it to a cross, and kept it as an ongoing sacrifice. Instead of listening to, spiritual teachings like the Buddha or like Christ had, instead we're constantly worshiping and groveling the human sacrifice. And that is not a life-affirming vibration. It's not in alignment with the golden rule. So I believe there's been some foul play by these secret societies to take good teachings like, what the Christ had brought and to invert them, transform them into things that suit big business and suit big empire. So it's a sad thing to see, but again, this is another one of these evolutionary lessons that we will learn from and will inform our future. And then this is the second to last slide here. Just take from here where it's like, these elite who are in alignment with their ET presences that they work for, who pull their strings, they want suffering, they want fear. This is what keeps the empire driven. This is what keeps the wheels spinning. Today with the COVID virus, this is an ongoing ritual to harness more fear, to tighten the clasps, to tighten the shackles, so to speak. I feel, yes, this was intentionally done. They felt that things were getting a little out of hand with people starting to realize what's going on behind the scenes with Jeffrey Epstein, with that whole network of very dark rituals and dark habits of the wealthy elite. So they had, these different doomsday plans on the shelf. So a viral infection to kind of get everybody back in line, get everybody afraid, further divided. It very much mirrors like the ritual of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We see again how in the terrorist attacks of 9/11, it was those nasty, awful Middle Eastern extremists. And this time it's those nasty, disgusting Chinese in their meat markets. They carry this kind of same just awful vibration to them that has nothing to do with benefiting humanity. It has everything to do with tightening their grasp because we're starting to catch on. We're catching on to their nonsense and the way they've been controlling humanity. We are awakening. So this actually shows their desperation. They have to resort to things like viral infections. These are, at the end of the day, these are very desperate cowards. They cannot work out in the light of reality. They have to operate in the shadows, deny everything, have their paid off corporate stooges and special interest agendas just at the forefront of what is most important. And they just don't have the energy. The future seasons of humanity are not going to uphold their corrupt empires. That constant downward spiral, it's collapsing on itself. So this is a last-ditch effort. I've been very happy to see the positive things coming out of this, such as the nice notes people are leaving on sidewalks. The environment has gotten a bit of a breather. And I do believe this is going to it's going to backfire on the global elite and open the door for positive changes. So very exciting times that we're living in right now. And this is the last slide, this destined future for humanity where we unify, we're not at war anymore, we're not in these cycles of profiting from endless special interest wars. That is going to become a relic of our barbaric past. It may take quite some time, whether it's 10 years, 100 years, or more in the future. That is determined by, fluctuating variables. It's determined how we live our lives on a personal level, not trying everything we can to support one another and not support these corrupt empires, in how we spend our money, the type of food that we consume. Where does our food come from? Is it processed corporate crap, or is it something we grow in our yard? We can do so much, and all of those little changes make a difference in the grand scheme of things. And there's that fractal theme yet again. So that's it. That is it. Thank you so much, Miles.
Well, thank you. This has been really a presentation about all this, and you've put some very important points there. Certainly, what you said, basically the Zachariah Sitchin stuff. ET changes us, and they're all on command, where we ourselves should be grasping and taking the earth for ourselves. The ownership seems to be changing at this time. You've come up with some very important points on that, especially about this COVID thing that's happening at the moment, which is absolutely shocking.
Yes. Yeah, no, if you corner a wild animal, it will lash out and do everything it can to maintain, its livelihood. So that is what we are seeing.
Well, can people get in contact with you in some way, or make any means of getting your book and stuff that we mentioned a little bit in the middle of the presentation?
Yes, if they want to look it up, the book is Unseen Dimensions, Journals of an Interdimensional Traveler. And I will send over to you all of this information for the description that we can put below the video. I have an email, philosophiazozo@gmail, that I'm always happy to get in touch and contact with anybody.
Okay, well that's fantastic. So
yeah.
This is essentially a basis lecture presentation, and it's been wonderful to have you deliver your personal experiences and also give some insights into the current situation, where, for the record, where on the 30th of April 2020, during the COVID lockdown, and what Bill Gates has described as pandemic number 1. He said that yesterday, apparently. So we can expect pandemic number 2, and number 3, and number 4. And I noticed that you've given some, these things come in cycles, and if we become aware and alert and assert our own freedoms, we can bring ourselves to this beautiful world that you show in the final slide. So thanks very much for your presentation, and we'll. I think we can. With any final word on this?
Just thank you so much. Just so much gratitude to you and to the listeners out there. Our destiny is for things to work out. The sun and the earth wouldn't have done all of this if it wasn't worthwhile. So evolution has its bumps in the road, just as we have our bumps in the roads in our own lives. But sometimes it's those bumps in the roads that shake us awake and bring us to who we truly are. And yeah, that's what we're seeing happening day to day. So
Thank
thank
you.
you, Miles.
And we'll see you on the other side of Orion.
See you there.